Welcome everyone to today's webinar, Grant Proposal Resources, Roadmaps, and Timelines. Today is March 9th, 2017. The webinar will be recorded and you'll get automatically a link to the recording. I'm your host for today's webinar. My name is Mike Lasecki here at the Maricopa Community Colleges in Phoenix, Arizona. You'll be in listen-only mode for this webinar using your computer or audio device, but please use the question window to ask questions of us. As I mentioned, this webinar will be recorded. This webinar series is brought to you by the Centers Collaborative for Technical Assistance. Well, what is that? What is the CCTA? Well, first of all, it's led by 5 centers. You can see the list of them here. We're in Texas, South Carolina, Tampa, Florida, San Francisco, and here at the Maricopa Community Colleges. The purpose of the CCTA is to respond to requests from the Department of Labor to provide technical assistance to not only TAT grantees, but to NSF grantees, and in fact anyone that's interested in workforce-oriented programs of any type. We do these webinars with live Q&As, usually following at some point, typically a week after the webinar. We identify and document best practices and host convenings. Let's start with a poll. I'd like to ask you about your affiliation. Are you involved with an NSF grant, a TAT grant, both, or neither? So just a moment and we'll launch the poll. So there it is on your screen. Please use the radio buttons. Check your association. I'll leave the poll open for just a moment because pretty much we know the answer to this one. Results are streaming in. I'm going to leave the poll open just for another 5 seconds and then we'll take a look at the results. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Now here's the results on the screen, and you can see that a number of us, in fact the largest fraction, are neither associated with an NSF or a TAT grant, and that's good because that means we're interested in getting into the proposal game, or that we'd like or we've been involved in grants and other mechanisms as well. Let's go ahead and close that poll. One more question before we get started today. Sometimes you're listening in a room where there's multiple people sitting around a conference phone or a conference room. Let me launch this poll, and would you please tell us how many people are with you today? So just yourself, 1, 2, or 3 more people. Please take a moment and just check that radio button. We use this to document our impact. Thanks very much. I can see all of you putting in your answers. We're almost ready to go. I'm going to close the poll in 5 seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Closing the poll. And now let's take a look at those results. There they are. Of course, most of us are by ourselves. That's typical. But a fair number of people are listening with a colleague or with 1 or more colleagues. So thanks very much. We appreciate your feedback on those polls. Let me introduce our presenters today. Let me start with Elaine Kraft. Elaine, you're the lead presenter today and the director of the South Carolina ATE Center of Excellence. Welcome. Would you please introduce yourself a little further and then introduce your colleagues?
Hi, Mike. Thank you. Hello, everybody. I am the director of the SCATE Center at Florence Darlington Technical College in Florence, South Carolina. It's also my privilege to be the principal investigator for the Mentor Connect project and for the SCATE National Resource Center for Expanding Excellence in Technician Education. It is a special treat to have with us today Dr. Elizabeth Tellis. Dr. Tellis is a program officer with the National Science Foundation who works in 2 funding programs, Advanced Technological Education, or ATE, and Scholarships in Science, Technology, Engineering, and Mathematics, or STEM. Dr. Tellis is a mathematician, and her professional experience includes community college teaching. We have always considered her one of our own. And she and a colleague actually designed and started the ATE program at NSF. Also joining us today is Mel Cassette. Mel has been a principal investigator for numerous NSF ATE grant awards. She currently is the executive director and principal investigator for MAD-EDU, the National ATE Center for Materials Science. Mel is also a mentor for the Mentor Connect project and for Science Foundation Arizona, where she has been successful in helping potential grantees prepare competitive ATE grant proposals. Next slide, please. You will notice that there are 3 parts to today's agenda. In Part 1, I will share my thoughts on the unique characteristics of NSF grant funding and why you should be interested in applying to this particular program. In Part 2, Dr. Tellis will share helpful hints for moving up to larger NSF ATE project grants. And in Part 3, Mel will point out some useful resources to help you prepare a competitive NSF ATE grant proposal. Now, let's start with some of my thoughts on what makes NSF grant funding unique. Next slide, please. So why pursue NSF grant funding? The first reason is that the National Science Foundation Division of Undergraduate Education, known as DO, offers funding that targets different levels and aspects of undergraduate education. Today, our focus is on the Advanced Technological Education, or ATE program, that focuses on technician and related STEM education at 2-year associate degree granting institutions. The ATE program strongly emphasizes partnerships with industry to align technician education with workforce needs. In addition, ATE encourages collaboration with other 2-year college and secondary school educators. Also important are pathways for students to continue their higher education at 4-year colleges and universities. But college transfer is not the focus of the ATE program. Other NSF undergraduate education funding programs are also available to community college applicants, such as STEM and IUSE, which stands for Improving Undergraduate STEM Education. A college can be awarded grants from different NSF funding programs simultaneously, and different grants can work together synergistically to improve STEM education. For example, the NSF STEM program provides funding for scholarships. The ATE program, on the other hand, does not fund student scholarships. If a college receives funding awards from both programs, students can simultaneously receive scholarships while technician education programs are being improved. The National Science Foundation would like to receive more grant proposals from community colleges. However, be aware that the funding rates vary by program. Most 2-year colleges experience greater success if they start with the ATE program. This is especially true if a college applies for a small grant for institutions new to ATE, where the funding rate is much higher than the ATE program overall. The overall ATE program funding rate is usually in the 20 to 30% range, whereas the funding rate for the small grants track is typically 60 to 70%. It's pretty easy to figure out where the odds are in your favor. Next slide, please. Another attribute of NSF grant funding is that the agency's proposal guidelines lead to thorough preparation and good project design. Once you have written a proposal, even if the proposal is not funded, you will have a well-developed project plan that can be implemented to improve technician education. And your college or an industry partner may choose to support your project. Another point is that the proposal you submit to NSF will be peer-reviewed. This means that those who review your proposals are people like you. For the most part, reviewers are teachers from similar institutions who share your discipline expertise. Some NSF reviewers will have other relevant expertise, such as industry representatives, social science researchers, and public school educators. Reviews are conducted by panels who apply the NSF intellectual merit and broader impacts criteria. The NSF proposal review process is non-biased, and it has long been referred to as the gold standard among federal agencies who award grants. Another nice practice at NSF is that the agency most often publishes multi-year solicitations. This gives you extended advance notice of grant deadlines. NSF also funds grants that enable assistance to be provided to potential and existing grantees. An example is Mentor Connect, an ATE project that teaches grant writing, STEM faculty leadership, and other skills required for preparing, submitting, and implementing successful NSF ATE grant-funded projects. Next slide, please. One very important distinguishing characteristic of NSF grants is no cost sharing. In fact, for most NSF programs, including ATE, cost sharing is expressly prohibited. Now, how great is that? However, the National Science Foundation does expect potential grantees to take advantage of work that has been previously funded. Partnerships are a hallmark of the ATE program. Partnerships with industry and other educators can be considered the common DNA across all successful ATE-funded projects and centers. Next slide, please. So, why do I describe NSF ATE grantees as happy and connected? One reason is that NSF program officers are user-friendly. They actually like to hear from you. Another is that principal investigators are given the latitude to behave like scientists. Potential PIs and grantee colleges are thoroughly vetted at the time a grant is made. After that, NSF expects the PI to conduct the funded project as he or she would conduct a scientific experiment. Test, evaluate, adjust, and test again to maximize results. This means that, with very few restrictions, NSF gives you and your college the authority to adjust your work plan and move money around in the budget throughout the project to achieve project goals. NSF program officers are there to help you, and you should always be consulted about major changes, but they won't be micromanaging your project or your budget unless, of course, you fail to do your job. Another attribute of the ATE program is its longevity. The program was mandated by Congress through the Scientific and Advanced Technology Act of 1992. The ATE program is now 24 years old. This makes ATE one of, if not the longest-running ATE grant program at NSF. Also, you will find that many ATE grantees have received multiple ATE awards. It is very gratifying to work with a program that sticks with those who do good work long enough to make a difference. Another big time saver is, unlike the Department of Labor's quarterly reporting requirement, NSF only requires annual reporting from grantees. The last point I would like to make about why you should actively pursue NSF ATE funding is that it connects you to a community of like-minded, dedicated educators who share a passion for student success and rigorous, relevant technician education across STEM fields. We often say that as a grantee, you become part of the ATE family, which is a community that shares freely and supports one another in a myriad of ways. Now, for those of you who already know all of this because you are or have been ATE grantees, NSF Program Officer Elizabeth Tellis will share with you some tips from the ATE community about how to be successful with your next larger grant proposal. Liz, I'll turn it over to you.
Well, thank you, Elaine, for inviting me to participate today. Many institutions have found that who've had smaller NSF awards or grants from the Department of Labor, or even something that's been funded locally by your school or by industry or by your state, have moved it on up to larger awards. So to help others learn from these successes, at the ATE meeting this last year, we had a roundtable discussion. We then built on that by further discussions among us and have written a short guide called Moving Up to Larger NSF ATE Project Grants. I'll briefly discuss today 15 hints in that publication, but don't worry, you don't have to write everything down quickly as the handout's going to be available. I want to encourage you to read it and learn from it and talk about it with your team. And even if you haven't had one of these grants, almost everything I say today will be broadly applicable to any type of NSF funding. Tip number 1, provide results of prior support because this really matters. Wait to submit a new project proposal until you have a clear rationale for additional support. The new proposal should not only include evaluation data from prior support, but it should be able to answer some of the following type questions. What did you accomplish? What did you learn during that prior project? And how will this project build on that? And how do you know? And more importantly, why do you need more money? So you have to justify that. Hint number 2, read the most current program solicitation carefully to assure that your ideas align with the program goals. Program requirements change, and there may be new opportunities that better fit your needs. Some opportunities that were available in the past no longer may be available. In fact, this year you're really lucky to come in at this point in time because the ATE solicitation is currently being rewritten for another 3 years, and it looks like there are going to be at least 2 new opportunities. So this program should be out in the next month or so, maybe at least by the beginning of June. And so I definitely encourage you to read it, because there's nothing worse than writing a proposal that fit the old program solicitation and doesn't fit the new one at all. Another important thing about this one this year is it looks like the maximums for different project tracks are going to be changing. Some are going up, some are going down, and you don't want to be asking for more money than that track allows. On the other hand, you don't want to go too far under what you might be able to get if you can justify it. Hint number 3, pay close attention to the latest version of the Proposal and Awards Policies and Procedures Guide. I know that's a great big mouthful there, but we just call it the PAPPG. In particular, this is where the college's authorized organizational representative, the AOR, who's going to actually submit the proposal on behalf of the institution, can follow those requirements outlined. Note that you can submit a proposal either on FastLane or by grants.gov. We strongly encourage you to use FastLane for at least 3 reasons. One reason is NSF has a wonderful help desk at FastLane. Another reason is there's some automatic checks built into FastLane that'll catch some errors that won't keep your things from being sent back. Not that everything, but there are some automatic checks, and it's just easier to use. The PAPPG provides such information as font sizes, margins, how to write project summaries, things like that. An extra little hint in this case is submit a day or so before the deadline, run off the proposal and check for errors. If it doesn't look good, if you've left something out like this last year, somebody left out the project summary, which is a required document. If it doesn't have something there, you can withdraw it and submit again. A particular problem is that in the project summary, it only allows ASCII characters, and so if you put in things like quote marks or apostrophes, they come out looking as question marks, and your project summary doesn't look very good. So I just tell you to try to be sure somebody at your campus who submits it knows these policies and carefully follows them. Next slide. The ATE program does allow for supplementary documents. The information in the program solicitations always takes precedence over the PAPPGs. So for example, the PAPPG has very strict limitations on supplementary documents, but the ATE program solicitation is much more flexible. The new solicitation is going to carefully outline what you can put in there, and so we want you to do that. For example, the ATE program does allow letters of commitment, whereas the PAPPG would not let you do that. On the other hand, be very, very careful. Don't include something in the supplementary documents that has to be in the body of the proposal. We've had some institutions that thought they could get some extra room by including the evaluation plan in the supplementary documents rather than in the proposal itself. So you don't want to do that. You need to use at least 2 pages of your proposal itself to put in the evaluation data. Hint number 5, and this one is very different from a lot of funding agencies. What we encourage you to do at ATE is to prepare a 1-page summary of your project well in advance, 3 to 6 months or even more. You could send it now. Send it to a program officer like myself, and then arrange for a phone call to discuss it. Program officers are always willing to spend time talking to you all the way up to the time the proposal is actually submitted. Now, once a proposal gets submitted, we can't talk to you about that until we either contact you and tell you that we're going to negotiate an award, which is, of course, what you want, or you receive a decline letter. Hopefully you won't, but if you do, then you definitely should talk to the program officer and plan to resubmit again. I'll have to tell you, the first one I submitted just didn't get funded, but the next year, by following the advice of reviewers, we had a very competitive proposal the next time. Number 6, ask advice from principal investigators, they're called PIs, at institutions that have received second ATE awards or even more. Ask them the lessons they learned about the grant process. Request copies of their funded proposals. Now, they usually won't share every part with it because some parts are considered private. But be very careful when you get the proposal to not replicate errors that they made. Ask what modifications to the proposal program officers ask them to make. So, for example, if a proposal included scholarships, the program officer would have had them remove the scholarships from the ATE proposal, so you wouldn't want to include that in your proposal. When you read these, this is what you need to think about, because some people will read a proposal and ask, why did NSF fund it? So when you read these funded proposals, ask yourself and think about and talk about what about those proposals were appealing to reviewers and what made them relevant to the ATE program. Next slide. Make sure your budget request closely matches the scope of your project, the number of partners, and potential subawards. Don't just go for the maximum because that's what is available. This often comes up and has one of two problems that may prove fatal. Number 1 is you may have asked for more money than you've actually justified in your activities. And a bigger one that I think people also make that really comes out looking like what I call the kitchen sink is that to try to get the maximum, they include extra activities, and it doesn't look like they have the people there who can carry out all those activities, or even that some of them are needed. Successfully completing a smaller scope of work and moving it on up slowly, maybe from 200,000 to 400,000 or 500,000, likely result in a stronger project than trying to go for the maximum immediately. Number 8, be clear about the scope and importance of your proposal to address local employee needs by including relevant local data and evidence in your proposal. Include true commitment letters from employees that describe uniquely what they're going to provide. Local project outcomes can then be linked to regional, national, or global trends for broader impact and dissemination. But remember that community college students usually want to stay close to home when they go to work, as they have families and commitments. And if there are no good jobs there, why would they enroll in your programs? Number 9, make it clear in your proposal who's going to do the work, and include people who have a passion for the project, commitment to achieving its goals, the capacity to show up for meetings, and follow through on their commitments to you. Develop a project with a team that sought the input of colleagues in other disciplines, from your college administrations, and from industry. You should name people in your proposal, even if they aren't one of the senior personnel or one of the ones receiving funds. For example, if you've got a career coach or a recruiter on your campus who's going to help you get students into your programs that are supported by the college or by industry or some other means, include their names. If a big part of your project is to have faculty or industry mentors, include their names in the proposal so that people can see who's actually going to do the work and carry out all your activities. If you're working with high schools that have CTE faculty, that's career and technical education faculty, who named in the proposal, because they're going to be the ones who are going to have to work with you to get these dual enrollment and other kind of projects actually achievable. Next slide. Choose Choose partners strategically and cultivate their ongoing involvement. So you have to think about, how can I build really effective partnerships? As a subsequent grantee, you'll be building on what you've already accomplished, but you do need to expand your impact. Think bigger and have more partners. So maybe in a small project that you only had to have 2 industry partners or even 1, now you're going to move it up to a larger project, so you may want to think about 5 or 6 in the new project. Industry partners are usually better than industry groups like the workforce investment boards and the chambers of commerce. So if you need to include a letter from the workforce investment board who are actually going to do something on the project, then that's fine. But make sure those letters have a specific commitment that reviewers can look at to find out how these people are going to be involved in your project. Number B, I want to emphasize something here, because this is one of the biggest mistakes I see in ATE proposals. Ask your partners to prepare authentic commitment letters that describe their precise role in the project. 3 good letters are better than 10 letters that look alike or that promise nothing. Or better yet, have a meeting and let the people of the industry people at that meeting sign a joint memorandum of understanding with you that you can submit. If all the letters are alike, except the industry or the high school name is changed, that's not acceptable. And in fact, there's some discussion that if you do that in these proposals, that they're going to be sent back without review. And yet that's a very, very common practice, so please don't do it. And also the letters that you submit need to actually commit to doing something. So don't submit what I call, I love you, and if you happen to produce enough students, then I'll think about hiring them. That's probably not going to fly. It's much better to say, I'll provide 2 internships or something along that line. On the other hand, don't be afraid to drop a partnership that wasn't working. If a partner doesn't deliver, can't work with them, or you had a great partner with that company and that person moved on and nobody stepped up to the plate, then go find a different industry to work with, or a different high school. So don't keep partners just because they've worked with you before. They have to be able to continue this relationship. Number 11, don't go beyond what your institution and your broader community of stakeholders actually value and can carry out. Aim your innovations or your new things where you already have a base of support and build on that support. Align your project with college priorities and documented community workforce needs. Don't propose to do something just because you've heard it's the coolest new thing, or maybe if you get this project going at the institution, maybe that industry might come there in 5 years. The ATE, you need to be able to show some results from this in typically 3 years of the project, so don't just go chasing rabbits. Similarly, a little bit to that is be sure if you're doing something with high school partners that you show a clear pathway to the community college, because the ATE program is a workforce program, and if you're working with high schools, it ought to be to get better and more prepared students into your programs. Number 12. Sometimes you need additional expertise on a project that you just don't have at your institution. So you can include in your proposals consultants and advisors from other projects that have had NSF funding, or particular experts out in the field. Particularly your evaluator is probably going to be a consultant, and you may need to give a workshop. Let's suppose you're really hoping to increase the number of women in your technical programs. You may need to bring in an expert on that to work with your faculty to get some strategies on it. If they're really critical to this, you can also include a commitment letter from them that commits to what they're going to do on your project, and you can include their vita if they're that, because this may add some expertise. Remember, we talked earlier about showing you had the expertise to do this. So you can include that type things in your appendix, in your supplementary documents. Next slide. Number 13, Elaine is part of a project called Mentor Connect, and they have lots and lots of resources things, and so use their materials and use their grant development principles. Mel's going to discuss these in the next part of the webinar, so I won't go into it too much, but we've definitely found out that projects that use these resources are much more competitive than those that don't look at the materials that the program has made available to you. Number 14, take evaluation seriously. Work with an evaluator who will provide feedback and some suggestions for improvement, not just somebody that crunches numbers. Be sure you talk about how your evaluation ties to your goals and objectives. We often see things in a table that will have something like, here's my goals and objectives, and here's how I'm going to evaluate and know if these things have worked. But be sure that your evaluation includes not only what we call accountability data, did you do it, but also some effectiveness data. What difference did it make? For example, if one of your goals was to create a new program in, let's call it cybersecurity, and you didn't ever get any students in it, you created the program and all the courses, but if students didn't come into it and if industry wasn't happy with those people, then it didn't make a whole lot of difference that you created it. So be sure you also talk about what difference it made. And finally, number 15, be sure to be prepared to receive funding. And this actually has two components. Some people think, well, I'll just throw it in the first time because, as Elaine talked about, you get lots of good advice and lots of feedback on your proposal, even if it's declined. But on the other hand, if you're prepared to receive funding, then you'll be ready when the grant comes. So go ahead and host these industry meetings and get their feedback. We've even found that some projects that got ready and weren't successful the first time, industry stepped up to the plate and went ahead and funded the project anyway. You can go ahead and get your faculty to go to many workshops and conferences and meetings that are supported by NSF and ATE. One of Elaine's resources is something called teachingtechnicians.org, and it talks about the development projects all over the country. Most of these won't cost you anything. The faculty are very little. You may have to provide your transportation to it, but those are excellent workshops and they get you involved in a community. Now, I would tell you that it's likely that the new ATE program is going to have some opportunity to adapt things that have been created by other projects. That's one of the new opportunities we're talking about. So go ahead and start looking at the NSF website for things that might interest you, or go to ATE Central to look. Or the ATE Centers has a wonderful website, and you can look at these materials and start thinking about what materials are already available that you wouldn't have to produce again that would work on that. So I appreciate your listening to me today. I'm hoping you'll read the documents that you'll be able to access after this meeting, and I hope you found them useful. I hope you'll contact me if you have questions, although for the next month I won't be available, but after that I'm pretty good at answering emails. But most of all, I'd tell you, have fun. So now back to Mike.
Thank you, Liz. Got a bunch of questions that have come in. I hope you're not exhausted from talking. We're perfectly on time, by the way. Here's a question for you. You mentioned the love letters. I have to admit I smiled at that, but the letters of support and commitment that come at the end of a proposal. One of the questions that came in, is it useful to have a letter, let's say from an elected representative like a senator or a congressman that might give support to your project? Would that be useful?
It is definitely not useful, and in fact we prefer you not to send those at all. Reviewers tend to not like them. They think it's a lobbying, and NSF's really proud that we don't have things lobby for our funding, that we fund the best for projects. So please don't do that. On the other hand, it's probably a good idea for them to know what's happening, and if you get funded, we clearly would hope you would tell them about the funding that you got there. If you really have to support something, it might be better for them to just send a nice letter to NSF or something about how pleased they are with things that are going on. But that will definitely not help in your proposal.
Well, that's good advice. Thanks. How do you know what you're submitting? Here's the question that came in. They're worried about duplication, like somebody's already doing it. They don't want to submit a proposal for the same thing. How do they avoid doing that? Is there any list you can check or something?
Are you talking about getting 2 proposals in the same year that's being supported, or are you talking?
No, duplication.
You're talking about already been funded.
Yeah.
Well, the ATE, all the ATE projects now are required to put things out on ATE Central. So you should go do some exploring on the ATE Central website. You should also look at the NSF web page. At the bottom of the ATE solicitation is things about prior funding, projects that have been funded by this program. So just spend some time looking those over. I'll put a plug in for Mike. You can look at the things that are being supported in presentations at High Tech. They have a wonderful website that's available on that, and lots of people do presentations at those. So, and then the teachingtechnicians.org has workshops and all. So you're going to have to do a little bit of homework. NSF clearly expects you to do some homework and find out what's been funded. On the other hand, it doesn't have to be something that's never been done before, because your institution is unique. And again, we're pretty sure the ATE program is going to do something this year that's going to have an opportunity for you to adapt some of these good projects at your institution. But there'll be something at your institution that's unique. Maybe it's a different set of students. Maybe it's a different industry group. Maybe it's something different that those particular ones are manufacturing that's state of the art. So everyone can be somewhat unique because your institutions are unique.
Well, thanks. Very interesting there. Here's a question of someone that's new, relatively new to grant writing. They wonder, do they submit the proposal themselves, or does the institution have to submit it?
The institution has to submit it. NSF only makes awards to institutions. However, we do require that on the front cover that there be faculty and other people at the institution who are working on the project. And the people who are named as these principal investigators cannot be the person who actually submits on behalf of the institution. It's just good accounting principles to have the people carrying out the work separate from the people who are involved with the financial part.
Sure, that makes sense.
You're going to have to name that. And again, please make sure they're not the same people.
Okay. One last question for now, and then we'll have another question period at the end. So folks, don't hesitate to use the question window. The question is, what are my chances? I mean, that's what came in by email. You mentioned that the Mentor Connect chances, or rather the proposals new to ATE have a good rate of success. But what about the regular ATE program? What are my chances like?
The ATE program actually usually varies from 25 to 35%, kind of depending on how many proposals come in and how many of each type, you know, funding kind of thing. So it's actually it's competitive, but it's still a good funding rate for federal programs. The scholarship is usually between 20 and 25, but they're much bigger amounts, so you might look at that project too. And again, everything we've taught today would kind of apply to that program too. So.
Okay. Oh,
and the IUs that Elaine did is a much lower funding percent, because that program gets up to as much as 800 or 900 proposals a year. So if you're new, you definitely ought to start with either the scholarship program or the ATE program.
Well, thanks. I know I promised that was the last one, but I have a quick one more. When we talk about submitting via an institution, can you be a 501c3 nonprofit, or do you have to be academic?
You can be a 501c3.
Okay.
You can be any kind of institutions except an individual, I think. And even there are some opportunities there, but I don't know any that have ever been funded. We've gotten some, but we do fund a fair number of professional societies, other kind of groups and things like that. So
good.
You just have to have what I think is called a SAMS number. You have to be registered to get federal grants somewhere.
Right. Well, Liz, thanks. I appreciate your information, all of us do, and your response to the questions. I'm going to turn now, I'm going to open Mel's microphone. Let me just click on this for a second. And, okay, Mel, you're open, and I'm going to go ahead and advance to your slide.
All right, thank you.
We hear you fine, thank you.
Thank you. Elaine and Liz, for inviting me to participate today. I think this is probably one of the exciting webinars, learning more about ATE and the different areas that you can apply in and those kinds of things. So I have the fun part. I get to talk about some of the things that I do with Mentor Connect and some of the helpful hints and tips that I've learned over the I guess being a PI for quite some time, and also working and enjoying Mentor Connect, because I am actually in my 5th cohort this year. So it's just a fun project, and I'm glad that Elaine had the foresight to apply for it. So next slide, please. I'm going to be talking about Mentor Connect resources. As we go through it, this part 3, we're going to be talking about some of the technical assistance, webinars, tutorials, some of the FAQs. It's a searchable library with some of these different resources. We're going to talk a little bit about selected NSF publications. Liz brought up a key one, which is the solicitation and the program solicitation and the PAPPG. And we'll be showing you just some front cover sheets of some sample proposals. And I'm going to go through a couple of checklists and guidelines and also talk a little about the help desk. Next slide, please. So some of the sample resources that you can find are technical assistance, our webinars and tutorials, and later on, I think in this presentation, Elaine's going to talk a little about specific about dates and that kind of information. But you can go on and find a tutorial on Mentor Connect. If you see it, the last bullet is the website, and if you go on there, it's very user-friendly. If you are looking for a specific topic, like I was playing with it the other day, I went up into the research mode and just put in tutorials, and they came up, and it's very easy. It's very user-friendly and very intuitive. So you can find a tutorial on budget justification, on all the forms we go through, also a little bit of help on evaluation for small projects, and these are all things that you can review, you can watch, and sometimes they're very specific. So for instance, if you want to look at something just around budgets and budget justification, you can download that, you can print it, you can have it for future reference, and if you missed the webinar, you can always go back and find it, because they do archive everything that they do, which is a fabulous service that they provide. Also, they have NSF advice on financial management of NSF ATE grants, so you'll find that it's got quite a few resources, depending on what it is that you're trying to find, what it is that you're trying to identify. So next slide, please. So some of the sample resources, if you go on, are the frequently asked questions, and I know that Mike's going to have a lot of questions after this one too. But if you go on there, you're going to find probably, I think, Elaine, last time I looked at it, which was last week, it's several pages of great questions and very in-depth answers. So I would go there first, because that's where a lot of the common questions can be answered for you. And that might save you a little bit of time and a little bit of stress if you just go there first and look. The other thing, though, that Mentor Connect provides is a help desk, and I have to tell you that's probably one of my best tools. If I can't find the answer, or if I want to find an answer and I think that maybe others might too, or I hear the same question from several mentees, then I just go to the help desk and I try and let them know what questions I'm hearing and seeing if they can help me with the standardized answer that could be for all the mentees. And then down the road we kind of consider maybe that's a good question to put in the FAQ, because if several people are asking the question, then maybe we need to be a little bit clearer. And that's the other part about the resources on Mentor Connect. They're very fluid. They're very real time. So they're very, they're useful and easy to navigate. The other piece is a searchable library of resources for grant writing. And they have some different pieces there that you can look at, get some ideas of how you would write something if you're searching for words, that kind of thing. But the tutorials are really easy. If you just go in and say, I'm looking for budgets, go there. It's there. You can see it. You can view it, or you can print it. You can download it. It just becomes, it's based on your needs. It's not just based on what possibly the majority would like. It gives you different ways to connect and different ways to be able to go on at any given time. The other part I said I really like is you can print them or you can download them, and you can take them with you, and it makes it really easy and very transportable. Another thing that came out of some of these meetings is the glossary of acronyms. As you know, Mentor Connect is a part of ATE, which is a part of NSF, which is a part, and I can go on, but we just try and get the acronyms, most of them that people have asked about, and so that's a really good source. It's a very good resource for folks that are just trying to get into this whole grant world. So I suggest that you go on Mentor Connect. You saw the website earlier. Go on it, snoop around, see what's there, see what can help you. Don't agonize over pieces, because you can just go there and find them. And if they're not there, ask. Send an email to the help desk, call them. They're very receptive to input. And maybe, again, if you're asking for something, maybe someone else will be asking for it too. Next slide, please. So what are some of the samples that you can find at the Mentor Connect library? And there is a button, by the way, where you can click on, and it's called Library. So it's it's very user-friendly and very intuitive. So the first one I would probably say, one of my favorite ones, is the NSF publication. A sample is the Prospective New Awardee Guide. If you go onto Mentor Connect, you can click on that, you can print it. Last time I looked, again, it was like last week, it was about 20 pages, or under 20 pages, but it really summarizes key points. And it really helps you. It doesn't overwhelm you. And as Liz said, the PAPPG is huge. I think it's 180 pages now. This kind of summarizes it and really helps you if you're thinking about applying. That is a great document to look at. The other piece that's on is proposal samples. For one we're going to show you is Gaston College and Monroe Community College. Next slide, please. And what you're going to see here is the cover sheet of what would it look like when you've submitted a proposal. If you can see, they assign you a number in the right-hand corner. It says NSF proposal number. As Liz said earlier, up above it says not for distribution. And again, you can ask PIs like myself if we've written one that you're interested in. We scrub them, that's what I call it. We clean out the information that we don't want to share or that's private, as Liz alluded to. But it does say not for publication. But these we've gotten, again, Mentor Connect is such a great program. They were given permission to use these to be able to be useful for other potential awardees. And you can see the information they're looking for. Dates, when you're going to start. In the middle, there's a amount requesting, when's it going to start, those kinds of things. So it's basic information that you really need to have. But we wanted to show you this because this is what a cover sheet looks like when it's all done. Next slide, please. The last bullet there, it's a checklist guideline sample. And it's a proposal discussion guide and monitor matrix. Next slide, please. This is a sample from the Mentor Connect library as well. And what this is, when we start working with our mentees, on the left-hand side it starts showing some of the key elements and components of a proposal. And then we talk about in the middle its strengths and weaknesses, and to the right is names. And what we do with this as mentors is we look at these, and as I'm working with my mentees, I go through this, and as I'm listening to them talk, and by the way, I meet with my mentees by phone once a month from the time we leave Mentor Connect meeting in February until October till they submit, and more if they need it. But this is how I track the strengths or weaknesses, and if I hear something during the conversation, again, some of the tips that Liz was talking about, I'm listening for those, I'm connecting. I can give them feedback right away about whether that sounds strong to me or whether that sounds like a weakness to me. So I use this particular form when I work with my mentees to track them, and they also, I feed it back to them, I send it back to them once it's done so they can kind of see where they're at. Next slide, please. But sometimes we have our own sample roadmaps, and I have taken one that that we got from Mentor Connect initially, and I've rearranged it for my use, which mentors can do. And it's a guideline for project development, and it's called an NSF ATE proposal component tracking grid. But what I found is I could take that grid and I can change some of the components in and out depending on the proposal that we're working with, whether it's STEM or IUs. I can still adapt it and move it around. So I use it as a proposal management tool. Next slide. And what I've done on this one, and again working with starting with the basics from Mentor Connect, is as I talk to my mentees, I also track this page, and I track and ask them exactly where those components are. For instance, if I was going down the left-hand side, it's the cover sheet. I know it's hard to read, but it does say cover sheet. It's a component, and project data form, the project summary is one page. And again, that's important because if you saw this in real life, you would see that that's bolded because it's a requirement. And again, that's what helps me communicate to my mentees what's important, what's required. And then I know who to contact if I'm having an issue or I'm concerned about they're not drafting it strongly enough, or they're not there yet, or I'm concerned that maybe they're getting too late in the game and they haven't gotten to that yet. And then I know who to contact, who's in charge of that, what's the person's name on that team. And so I work with that person to try and work on their component so that it gets completed. Then on the right-hand side, it's a due date. When is it complete? That helps me track and reporting back to Mentor Connect in a very succinct form of where are they and will they be on track, are they on track, and will they be able to submit by the time the deadline comes in October. So I hope those are helpful hints to you, and I'd be happy to work with anybody who would need something like this or this kind of a form. And thank you for the time today, and I'm going to turn this back over to Elaine.
Thank you, Mel. My co-presenters and I hope that we've inspired you to prepare and submit an ATE grant proposal in October 2017. The resources of the ATE program, including those of us in the ATE community, are here to help you. Now, back to Mike to conclude with the webinar with final questions, announcements, and an important evaluation activity.
Thanks,
Mike?
Elaine. I do have a question, Mel. Let me start with you. You mentioned how much you love that help desk, that Mentor Connect help desk.
Yes.
Can anybody take advantage of that, or you have to be a mentee?
That's a good question, Mike.
Elaine, do you know the answer?
Ask that. Yeah.
Well, the help desk is typically our project manager and co-PI, Charlotte Forrest, or me. Charlotte fields the questions first, and if she needs some help answering them, then she tosses them to me. What I can say is we're always a little bit hesitant to open the barn door too widely, but we've never yet turned anybody down. So
that's good.
We have a passion for helping prospective grantees, and you are certainly welcome to call. We do encourage you to, to look first and see if you can get your answers from the online resources, just to help us stretch our hours. But we're here for you.
Good. I'm going to raffle off the help desk phone number on eBay. Sorry. I've got to have a question for you, though, Elaine, about Mentor Connect. How do you get a mentor? That's the question that came in. How do you get a mentor?
Well, once a year, we accept applications. The applications are available the 1st of July of each year on our website. And colleges apply by putting forth a team of 2 STEM faculty members that will work as a team to develop a proposal. We also work with grant writers and administrators at the college, but the core of this proposal team needs to be the STEM faculty members. So the applications are due the 1st of July. They come out and they're available at that time, and then they're due the 1st of right at the beginning of October. And from the applicants that we receive each year, we select 20 colleges to work with, and those colleges are supported in a number of ways. They're considered the cohort colleges, so you're in the cohort, and the cohort participants get a little bit of extra help. They get some travel support for those faculty to come to workshops to learn grant writing skills, and we also finance the faculty to go to the high-tech conference that Liz Tellis mentioned, which is held in July each year, where we have another face-to-face meeting with them to teach them some more tricks of the trade and let them work with their mentors face-to-face again. Plus, they get the huge advantage of being able to participate in the terrific faculty development that high-tech provides. And those are and then we pair each of the cohort college teams with a mentor, and each mentor, like Mel, works with 2 teams for the year to get them ready to submit their proposals. Now, for people who are not in the cohort, our technical assistance webinars, and we offer a minimum of 3 of those each spring, 1 on budgets and budget justifications, 1 on forms, and 1 on evaluation, are open to anybody. Our library resources, FAQs, all the resources that Mel mentioned are available to anyone. So a great deal of what we offer is open to anyone who's interested in pursuing this grant funding. And those that are selected in the cohort just get the one-on-one assistance and some face-to-face time that we're able to provide because of our grant funding.
Well, thank you, Elaine. It's an interesting program, so really the next time it opens up, if I'm correct, is July 1, right?
Right.
Okay. Could I turn the spotlight back on to Liz for a moment? Dr. Tellez, here's a question for you. How does the NSF feel if you write the same proposal at the same time to another agency? Is that allowable? It's like doubling your chances in a way.
Well, truthfully, because each agency has things they're looking for, if you submitted the exact same proposal to 2 different agencies, it probably wouldn't do very well. But we definitely would encourage you, if you've had funding through something like the AT support has supported a lot that came through TAG ABET, to add something to it. I don't think you're actually supposed to submit the exact same thing, but certainly related things. So if one program emphasizes a high school part, you could submit to the ATE program to do the community college part. Or if that part supported equipment, you could apply to the ATE program. A little bit the trick would be if you were counting on one to give you the equipment and then it didn't come through. So I would say sometimes that backfires a little bit when somebody says, well, what if they don't get that funding if they're depending on that? But you really shouldn't submit the exact same proposal. We've also had a few instances where people have submitted the exact same proposal to 2 NSF programs, but because most program officers work across programs, we recognize that pretty well, and actually that could be sent back without review if we saw 2 of the exact same proposals.
Well, thank you. And you actually were serious about accepting phone calls from people, weren't you?
Well, what I'd like you to do is send me an email and let's set up a time for a phone call, because that's the way it is, because otherwise I don't like to play telephone tag with you. So, but I'm more than happy to chat with people. I do ask that people send me a half page up to a page so that when we have the conversation, the people on the other end have thought about it enough to do it. Now, if it's just a quick question, like we can sometimes do it by email, but I am very serious. I enjoy talking to people. I taught math at a community college for a long time, so I like doing these kinds of things. So I travel a fair amount, though, so give me some flexibility if you want to have a long conversation.
That's a kind offer. Thank you. One more for you. See, I'll paraphrase this question slightly. Is there a preference? That's probably not the right word, but what if you've never submitted a proposal before and you're going against in organizations that have received funding before? Is there like a preference, you know, it's better to be part of the old network, or is there no preference either way? What do you think about that?
There's no preference, and in fact, the institution is new to ATE. If you come in under the limit, which the last few years has been under $200,000, you're put in a set of proposals where you're only in competition with other ones that have never received any funding, and we actually have been funding a larger percent of those because we want to bring in people. A big part of the ATE program is increasing participation. So I would say you actually have a slightly better. Now you do need to use the resources and don't submit something that you haven't researched and things like that. But Elaine has lots of guidance, and I can help you. Celeste, there are lots of program officers. Celeste Carter's head of the ATE program. She does the same thing. Tom Higgins, who was from city colleges to Chicago. So you don't need to talk to me particularly, but there are lots of program officers. Their names are on the website, so you can look at the NSF website.
Well, thanks very much. Folks, we're perfectly on time right here for our last set of announcements. We're going to have a follow-up Q&A session on March 16th. You do have to register for that one, so if you go to our usual website, atecenters.org/upcoming webinars, with a hyphen in there, you'll be able to register, or you can send questions in advance to Christina, and you can see her email there. You know, all of our webinars are at 3 p.m. Eastern Time, and in our 4-part series, the next one coming up is on March 23rd. You see it there, Developing Stakeholder Partnerships Internally and Externally. On April 20th, the last in the series, Final Tips for a Competitive Proposal. So typically we'll have live Q&A sessions after each of these. You heard Liz mention HITECH, so that's the one place, if you're going to one conference this year, come to HITECH, where we partner with industry for the new American workforce and network with each other across the community college and higher ed spectrum, as well as including the pre-college folks as well. Real opportunity to talk about workforce development issues, and advanced technological education. At the end of HITECH is a special free half-day event on Friday, July 20. That's an opportunity to talk about issues like the ones we've been discussing today and learn more about funding opportunities on both sides. You can register right on the HITECH website for that. Take a look at that. As you exit this webinar survey, there's a new browser window that opens. There's a couple of very brief questions that helps us demonstrate our impact. Please take a moment to help us become better. Now, as we conclude our webinar for today, Elaine, I'd like you to come back in. Do you have any final thoughtful remarks? We're now, let's see, October is the submission, so we've got about 6 months, 5 or 6 months to go until that proposal submission date. Any final remarks before we conclude today?
Well, if you are interested in putting in a proposal, don't procrastinate. There are a lot of moving pieces. You know, it gets easier after you've done one and you sort of understand how they get put together and all the required components. But there is a lot of detail, and it's not, there are many things that are very difficult, if not impossible, to do at the last minute, like getting those good, strong commitment letters that Liz Tellis mentioned. So just start now. Don't procrastinate. If you get an ATE award, I don't think you'll ever regret it. It's a great community to work in.
Thank you again, Elaine, and Liz and Mel. Really appreciate your input today. Colleagues, this officially ends our webinar. Remember, this webinar has been recorded, and you can review it or pass around the link to a colleague. We'll send out that link to you over the next couple of days, or you can find the link on the website as well. Thanks, everyone. Don't forget to click on the survey. Goodbye.